Welcome back. In this video, we are going to talk about StackPanel, Listbox, then the logical tree and the visual tree. So first of all, let's go ahead and get rid of this grid because we have not touched grid yet. So we haven't used grid correctly yet, but we will do so in one of the next videos. So instead of a grid, I want to use a stack panel. A stack panel allows me to stack elements on top of each other. So I simply can go ahead and add a text block in here, for example, and I'm gonna simply write the text like hello world, simple text. And as you can see, there is my text hello world. Now what I also want to do is I want to align it. So horizontal alignment, I'm gonna use center here. So now I'm centering the text. As you can see here, now the text is centered, and also maybe a little margin towards all directions, which is 20. So as you can see, I'm using a margin and just saying 20, which will say, or which will create a margin towards all the 4 directions of 20 pixels. Now the next thing is a list box. And I want to use a list box just so you see how one looks like. So this list box here currently is empty, but we can change that very easily by creating a list box item in there. So let's go ahead and create a list box item. And that item should have the content of, let's say, content is equal to item 1. And now instead of having an opening and closing tag, I just want to have this shorter version. So I use the slash here. And Visual Studio is smart enough to get rid of the closing tag for me automatically. So now this list box has this item 1, and I'm just gonna copy and paste it multiple times. So I'm gonna have item 1 and 2 and 3. And now this list box takes up the whole width, as you can see. It takes the whole parent, and it's only as high, or yeah, as high as it's required. So it means only as much space is required as the elements inside of it are in their height. So it's pretty much, let's say this item 1 and item 2 and 3, they are each 30 pixels high. So this whole box would just be 90 pixels high. But we can change that by, let's say, adjusting the height. And I'm just gonna use a height of 100. As you can see, it's higher than the object was before. And now let's create a width as well of also 100 pixel. So now you can see this box is a lot smaller and it fits right in. All right. Now, if I want to have a margin towards all directions, I can also give this element a margin. But as you can see, because this hello world text block has a margin of 20 towards all directions, there is also a distance between those two list elements here, or between the list box and the text block. Now, if we run that code, we will see that we have this little main window, which is beautiful and has our list box with its elements. So as you can see here, hello world, the text block, and then those list elements. You can click on them, you can even select them, as you can see, but nothing else happens because we have not checked out the events yet, which we will do in the next video. Okay, so I'm gonna close that again. And now let's quickly talk about the logical and the visual tree. So what we have here is a logical tree, or we can see the logical tree in XAML. So the logical tree is a window. Inside of that window, we have a stack panel. Inside of that stack panel, we have a text block and a list box. And within the list box, we actually have the list box item 1, list box item 2, and 3. So that's the logical tree. You pretty much have multiple branches. It goes deeper and deeper. So the window has a branch of stack panel, which has 2 branches, and one of them is the list box, which has branches as well, and so forth. So as I said again, this is the logical tree. Now let's have a look at the visual tree, because if I, for example, add a button here, and I'm going to need that for something in a second. So I create a new button. I give it the content of click me. And I'm also going to add a method in here, which will be called whenever somebody clicks. So I'm using click here, and I'm creating a new event handler. And what that does for me, it creates a new method called button click. If you look here now, we can see that there is a method called button click, which has an object sender and rooted event arguments called E. So what this pretty much does is this method will be called whenever we click on the button, and whatever we have inside of this method body will be executed. So let's say we use a message box, something that we haven't used yet, and we call its method show. We can simply show a box, or a box will appear like a little pop-up, and which will show us some text. So something like, thanks for clicking me. And the text said, click me. And the text that will come up like this, thanks for clicking message box, will show something beautiful like, thanks for clicking me. So as you can see, this click me button is just below our list box. So now please go ahead and add a little distance between them. All right, I hope you try to do that. And we can either give our button a margin, and I'm just going to use 20 again, or we could have given our list box a margin, but giving the button a margin should totally be fine. So now if we run the code, we will get this beautiful click me button here. So we have the hello world, we have the text and so forth, or the list box. And now if we click on click me, this message box pops up and says something like, thanks for clicking me. And we can click OK to close that message box again. So let's open it up. As you can see, click me, thanks for clicking me. So that's a message box, and we can use that in a, let's say, similar way that we have used the console write line in our console applications for testing purposes. So it's pretty cool. If we want to open up something after an event, we simply open a message box, so we know, okay, it worked. Great. So that's the button and our logical tree. Now let's have a look at the visual tree. So in order to get the visual tree, there are multiple ways, but the one that I'm going to use is I'm going to add a point here, a debug point. So it will run into debug whenever this line of code is executed. So let me start the code, or start our program. Now I click on the button and our program stops, and we get into the debug mode. And in here, I can go to the WPF tree visualizer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that, and it opens up the WPF visualizer, which has the visual tree, which also has those properties on the top right hand, or on the right hand side. As you can see, there are so many properties for our button, for example, or for our list box, also plenty of properties. And it even tells me all of the values of those properties. And we didn't even set any of those, well, except for the margin maybe. But other than that, there's nothing that we have set up. And as you can see, the background is white. That's always good. So we could change that in code as well. And by the way, what is important here now is our visual tree. And you see some aspects of our logical tree in here as well. So for example, you can see the main window, then you see the stack panel. In there you see the text block, list box, and the button. But there's a lot more. As you can see, the main window has a border, which we don't see in the logical tree, but we do in the visual tree. Then it has an adorner decorator, a content presenter, which actually shows the content then, which is the stack panel. And the stack panel again has a text block, a list box, which has a border. Then the list box has a scroll view. So if there are too many elements to show in the height that it has, then it will have a scroll capability. Then there is a grid in there, which contains a rectangle, and a scroll content presenter, which has an items presenter, a visualizing stack panel, and then in there we find our list box item 1, which again has a border, which has a content presenter, and finally we can find the text block. So you see, it's a very, very long tree here, very many branches, but in the end, what you can find is all the different elements that are visually in your program. And this can be very helpful if you want to find out more about generally what is represented or used in your program and what you have added to your program. But that's generally how you can find everything out about the visual tree. And as you can see, we have a grid within our list box, which we didn't set up ourselves, but it's just there, right? And if you click on that grid, you can also find the properties of that grid on the right hand side. Okie dokie. So that was pretty much it for the visual tree, the logical tree. We have used StackPanel and Listbox. We will use StackPanel a lot more in the future, so get used to that. And yeah, in the next video we will check out events. So see you there.